Welcome back to Beyond the Benchmark, where we strip away the noise and talk about the forces truly shaping markets, money, and the economy. I'm Brad Casper, and today's episode is titled Jobs Are Losing Altitude, and the Fed Knows It. Markets have been happy to dance with the soft landing story all summer, but August's jobs report, it's a reality check. The labor market isn't collapsing, but it is cooling in a way that looks less like benign supply growth and more like weaker demand. And that distinction matters, because the Federal Reserve has its ear tuned to labor, and the longer hiring stays muted, the easier it becomes for unemployment to creep higher. Let's break down the numbers without jargon. Non-farm payrolls rose just 22,000 in August. The consensus was 75,000. Private payrolls did slightly better at 38,000, but still half of expectations. On top of that, revisions shaved another 21,000 jobs from prior months, pushing June into outright contraction, the first since December 2020. If you average it out, payroll growth over the past 3 months is now sitting at just 29,000. Income momentum is cooling too. Nominal aggregate earnings have grown at a 2.4% annualized pace over the past 3 months. Hours are flat, wage gains are slowing. That's not the recipe for robust household demand. The household survey offered a little more balance. Employment rose 288,000, reversing July's drop. Participation ticked higher. Prime age employment improved. But here's the catch. The unemployment rate climbed to 4.32%, a new cycle high, and broader underemployment up to 8.1%. So yes, supply is there, but demand is wobbling. The weakness isn't random, it's concentrated. Cyclical sectors like manufacturing, construction, and trucking have been bleeding jobs, posting contractions in 3 of the past 4 months. Construction alone shed 7,000 jobs in August. The cushion has been healthcare and social assistance. But even that ballast may be thinning. Job openings in the sector have dropped to the lowest since 2020, and hours worked have hit record lows. Remember, hours typically lead headcount. If employers are cutting hours, payroll reductions usually follow. Some argue lower net immigration has reduced the break-even pace of payroll growth needed to hold unemployment steady. Maybe. But when you're adding only 29,000 jobs a month and unemployment is still rising, that's not where you want to be this late in the cycle. The headline unemployment rate still looks historically low, but it's masking cracks. More people outside the labor force are saying they want a job. The share of workers reporting zero wage growth has pushed to new cycle highs. Surveys are echoing the message. The Conference Board's jobs plentiful minus jobs hard to get differential has fallen to new lows. Small business owners citing weak sales as their top problem have hit highs. None of this screams collapse, but it does suggest U3 is understating slack. The labor market is losing altitude beneath the surface. So what does this mean for the Fed? September was already locked in for an easing step. The question is whether it's 25 basis points or 50. The hawks are still focused on inflation, but the risk profile is shifting. As Governor Chris Waller put it, a linear slowdown can morph into non-linear deterioration. If tariffs start bleeding into prices while demand cools, the Fed could easily find itself behind the curve, forced to cut more, and later. Rates markets are already sniffing it out. The implied terminal rate has drifted toward last September's growth scare lows. And here's the key. More cuts for the wrong reasons, weak growth instead of benign disinflation, are not the stuff of carefree equity rallies. Equities have treated weak data as good news, leaning on the idea of easier Fed policy. Last year, that worked, because the labor market cooled mostly from higher supply, not weaker demand. This year is different. Slower hiring plus 2.4% income growth implies softer consumption and thinner pricing power, especially with trade frictions raising costs. Now, low hire, low fire can linger for a while, but it doesn't take many layoff headlines to tip payrolls negative and push unemployment higher. Still, don't confuse caution with calamity. The Fed's safety net, the so-called Fed put, has always been a labor market put, and with jobs now steering the mandate, policy support should arrive faster than in past cycles. That argues for shallow, brief weakness and keeping a shopping list ready in quality cyclicals and growth if credit spreads remain orderly and earnings don't collapse. A few things investors should keep an eye on. Benchmark revisions to the establishment survey arrive Tuesday. Expect noise, but they'll likely reconfirm what we already see. Slower payrolls, rising slack. ISM employment remains in contraction. If services soften alongside manufacturing, the narrative gets harder to ignore. JOLTS job openings are near the lowest since 2021, with the openings to unemployed ratio slipping below 1.0. That's waning demand. Construction quits and layoffs are flashing early cycle rollover signals. All of these feed into the same picture, a labor market that's not collapsing but definitely losing altitude. Here's the takeaway: the labor market isn't falling apart, but with hiring this muted, the line between soft landing and softening into something harder is getting thin. The Fed will cut in September. Whether it's 25 or 50 matters less than this. The Fed knows jobs are losing altitude, and it's pivoting before that descent steepens. For investors, that means it's not time for panic, but it is time for discipline. Be selective, keep dry powder, and let the Fed's renewed focus on employment create better entry points when weakness shows itself. That's it for this episode of Beyond the Benchmark. Remember, markets trade on stories. Right now, the story is jobs. And as the Fed pivots, the story becomes opportunity, but only for those ready to adapt. I'm Brad Casper. Thanks for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe, share this with colleagues and clients, and stay tuned as we continue cutting through the noise to bring you what really matters.